Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in these southern United States. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, folks, the lines are open now. We've already opened the lines. We're a little low on programming today, so feel free to call in. Would love to hear from you. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We appreciate everybody tuning in today, folks. We do have a good show for you today. We have like a few less specific topics that we're going to be getting to. But we've got some folks from the Painters Union coming on to talk to us about being a union painter in Alabama. We are going to be talking to video game quality assurance workers at Microsoft subsidiary ZeniMax Media about how they recently unionized and how they just got a new industry standard setting tentative agreement. Really exciting stuff there. Those video game quality assurance workers coming from all across the United States, including in the South, in Texas. Some of these folks are in Texas. Really excited about that. We're going to be talking about the U.S. Steel Nippon deal that Trump has been talking about, some potential good things, maybe some reasons for skepticism. And then, folks, I know that folks are listening to us on the radio right now, but just so you remember, we have a whole second half of the program that we do that is mostly online. A recording of the second half plays on a couple of stations across the South, but if you want to listen to it live, you got to find us online, Facebook and YouTube. We're going to be having on Sam Sachs, the newsman for Means TV. It's going to be talking to him about the news of the day, going to be talking to him about Medicaid work requirements and why those are dumb, and a lot more. 844-899-TVLR. Would love to have somebody call in. Really appreciate folks tuning in. We have already only been broadcasting for 60 seconds. We got 10 people watching us on YouTube, but only 2 people have liked the stream. Go ahead and like the stream if you haven't. Appreciate everybody tuning in on Facebook as always. Adam, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, y'all. I'm doing okay. I'm not in studio, so it's a little different, but looking forward to hearing some of the show. I have to work this morning, so I will not be participating for most of the show, unfortunately. But I look forward to catching up on these interviews, especially, Sam Sachs is someone I've been watching for quite a while on Means Morning News. So really, really pumped to have him on the program.
Yeah, bummer that you're not going to be able to participate in the interview with him. Also, this afternoon, right here in Huntsville, Alabama, Adam and I are going to be at Campus 805. Campus 805, the Butler Green, the folks who did that April 5th protest, the really big one that I spoke at. They're having a pro-union rally at the Butler Green at Campus 805 that's going to be starting at 4 o'clock in the p.m., 4 p.m. I'll be there. Adam will be there. Other union folks will be there. Going to be a good afternoon. Going to shoot the breeze with folks, talk about unions, explain what a union is, how you can join one. So really looking forward to that. Adam, you have been out on you were out in Minneapolis last week for a work trip, doing at a conference. Can you talk to us a little bit about what were some of the interesting things that you saw out there?
Yeah, I was in Minneapolis this week with a variety of labor and labor adjacent folks. Basically people working on worker power throughout the country. And there were folks from, California, the Northeast, throughout the South. Had a lot of brothers and sisters from Mississippi, which I was proud to see as a native Mississippian. And yeah, it was interesting to interact with folks from different states, hear some of their struggles. There were public sector, private sector, there were worker centers, there were adjacent nonprofits and other advocacy organizations that work alongside unions, right? So it was not just labor union folks, but folks working on worker power more broadly, people involved in cooperatives. So, that was really cool. And something that really stood out to me was just when I go to things like this, or when I talk to folks from other areas, it really stands out how behind we are in Alabama and much of the South when it comes to movement ecosystem, movement infrastructure. In Minneapolis, they have a very strong labor council. They have strong labor councils throughout the state, very active state federation for labor. And they also have all sorts of other, organizations kind of on the periphery that do a lot of different tasks, do a lot of different roles, and bring a lot of different kind of people into this labor movement to try to build a broad working class mass movement. I got a chance to spend time at a worker center in Minneapolis, actually just a short walk from where George Floyd was murdered. And of course, it was the anniversary recently, this past week or two. And so, it was kind of a heavy time to be in that space and get a chance to speak to activists and organizers who've been on the ground for 5 years now. But, the Workers Center was really interesting because as far as I know, we don't really have any worker centers anymore in the state of Alabama. And there are not very many in the Southeast generally. And worker centers are really cool because, it's a physical space, right? So workers, community activists, community groups can all actually use a physical space to meet, to train, to gather, break bread. But worker centers often work with unorganized workers, in many cases, immigrant workers in construction, retail, restaurants, agriculture, various sectors where there is low union density and high exploitation. And so it was really cool to get a chance to interact with folks from Saytool, CTUL, Saytool, the Worker Center there, and hear about how they've kind of transitioned from a service model to a more organizing model. And, when they first, something that stood out to me is they talked about when they first started, they were very much in a service model. A worker would show up with a problem. The organizer would talk to them and then talk to a lawyer and then filter that back to the worker and basically tell them what to do and come up with a game plan. Whereas they really tried to embrace mass organizing and leadership development in recent years. And, I think that is really huge. Ultimately, we need more working class leaders. And we are capable as working class people. There are brilliant folks all in every industry. There are people who could be true leaders in this labor movement, in this working class progressive movement. And so I really appreciate the emphasis on that leadership development and getting folks from different industries, from different communities, to be willing to be bold and take risk and take collective action. And, as a result, they've been able to produce a lot of wins, right? They have put a lot of money back into the pockets of working people in the community, whether it's through fighting wage theft or, raising standards and wages, expanding unions. It's really exciting to see. And so, in Alabama, we're lacking these worker centers. Something else that stood out to me was that labor unions collectively had gone in together on a really big building there's physical space, and it was, a significantly sized building, multi-story. And my understanding is over a dozen unions actually share the building. They have offices there. They have huge meeting areas, ability to bring community folks in when needed. And there again, that's a deficit that I think we're facing in the Southern movement in many states, where frankly we just don't have a lot of physical spaces to meet and to come together, and to do the kind of work that we want to do, to build leaders, to build a movement, to take collective action, and to strategize on how we do that, how we do it successfully. So, I love getting to learn from other folks from other areas and see the way movements have developed. Obviously, Minneapolis is a big city. Minnesota is a big state compared to Alabama. And, something else that I noticed is that even Tennessee seems to have a more robust movement infrastructure, from a holistic approach, compared to Alabama or Mississippi. And a lot of that, of course, can be credited to Nashville. So I've been thinking a lot, just reflecting on this trip, how do we build worker power in more rural areas, right? We can't just have strongholds in the big urban centers, right? That can't be the only place we're doing coalition building. That can't be the only place where we have, faith and labor tables. That can't be the only place where there are adjacent nonprofits who are, playing supporting roles to what the unions are trying to do. So that's something that's really been on my mind, reflecting on this trip, is how do we, do that kind of coalition building, build the sort of infrastructure and leadership development in more rural areas, where, it is more difficult to connect people, frankly, and to get people together. Especially when we lack public transportation. We have folks who are really spread out throughout the state. If you go outside of Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile, right, there are counties that are just sparsely populated. And so that's a issue I think we really have to wrestle with, is making sure that we are building power in more rural areas. But yeah, it was great to hear. I met a brother from UE Local 150. We just had UE President Carl Rosen on the show last week, and met someone from that local. And, as we mentioned last week, North Carolina has banned collective bargaining for public sector workers, but that hasn't stopped them from building a fighting union, a militant union that can actually produce wins, because they are able to take action together. They're able to build leadership from the rank and file working class. And that's really exciting. And so I think they're just, in summary, we have to have a lot more collaboration here in the South. Where unions exist, we have to be collaborating amongst ourselves a lot more and talking amongst ourselves a lot more, helping each other, strategizing together. But we also have to be working with the other, progressive allies and forces out there that can help us and should help us, whether that's faith allies, community groups, nonprofits, political folks. Because, of course, in Minnesota, they have advocates that they've been able to elect to office. They have politicians that are willing to go to the mat for working class issues. And, that's not to say their politicians are perfect by any means, but clearly they have done some things that we have not been able to achieve yet. And so that, I feel good about it. I feel hopeful about it, but it definitely dawns on me that we have a lot of work ahead here in the South.
If anybody has any thoughts on, what ways that unions can be building in the South, we'd obviously love to hear it. 844-899-TVLR, and you can leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week at that number. That's 844-899-8857. We do have a caller on the line, and then we'll get to our interview with the painters here in just a second. Got to be quick, but we do have a caller from a 510 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 510 area code, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Zach Hyden. Hey, guys, how y'all doing?
Hey, Zach, what's on your mind?
I was just calling. Adam was talking about rural organizing and rural power building, and what's going on in Walker County with the Cagle campaign, with Ryan Cagle's campaign. I think is kind of an example of that, in the sense that I'm the campaign manager for the campaign. We don't have money for polling. We don't have money for advertising. We don't have money for anything. We're basically just using social media. And, person after person is coming in and saying that they're Republicans, but they're going to vote Democrat because Ryan gives them hope.
Mm.
And I think we need a narrative of hope for our rural areas and even our urban areas, something that everybody can get behind. That's simple and straightforward. And I think we can build that solidarity in rural power.
Zach, appreciate the call. Thanks for that. Yeah, the Cagle campaign looks really interesting. We did have Cagle on the show a couple of weeks back, and I do think that there is something to the idea about giving hope to folks is a really good way to kind of convincing people that a better world is possible is really the key. And so how do you do that? But if you're able to convince people that a better world is possible, you can build support and you can build power, I think. And I think that we're seeing something like that happening right now in New York City with Zohran Mamdani, a DSA candidate for mayor, who is surging, who is now only single digits behind Andrew Cuomo in the race for mayor. And so we're going to be talking to actually the co-chair of DSA next week on the show, the co-chair of DSA nationally. And we're going to be talking to him about the Zohran campaign in New York and what it would mean in the South and for unions nationwide to have a strong pro-worker governor in New York City, what that could mean for the rest of us. So yeah, appreciate the call, Zach. Call back anytime, 844-899-TVLR. We do have on the line now a couple of painters from the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT District Council 77, Sarah Reimer and Josh Thompson, both representatives for IUPAT District Council 77. Sarah, Josh, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be here.
Really great to have you. So I wanted to talk about, your, how y'all came into the union, and what it's like being a union member, in a right-to-work Southern state. And so we'll start with you, Sarah. Can you explain to folks when they hear painters, some people may not know exactly all of the work that your members do. So what sort of work do members of IUPAT District Council 77 do?
Oh my goodness. So yes, we are the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. So we do drywall finishing, glazing, which is not donuts, but that would be, installing glass, storefronts and stuff. And then we also do industrial, commercial, and sometimes even residential painting. So, and floor coverings too. It just depends on what the material is. So we cover a lot of different industries.
And so how did you join the union, Sarah? How did you get into this business?
Well, so I came from a family of painters and or industrial or coatings engineers. That's what my dad always called it. But I grew up in it, so I grew up having that respect and knowing where his paychecks came from, and he was a big proponent in why I got in. But I didn't initially want to, I guess, as any teenager. So I fought against it, but then I kind of got in a financial situation and ended up joining, and it was the best decision I ever made. Literally, it changed the trajectory of my life in the best way possible.
And so were your parents union painters down in Mobile or in South Alabama where you're at now, or were they from somewhere else?
So actually, Jacob, I am from East Tennessee. Okay.
Okay.
Our district council covers 7 states, and I love Alabama. I have worked in Alabama several times, and if given the opportunity, I would jump ship and move there. uh, but no, we're from East Tennessee. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure that Julie would not like for you to do that. So I'm sure she's
She
going to
would
want you keep she's going to want to keep you where you're at. So I think we'll allow that here in Alabama. Josh, what about you? How did you get into the union? Oh, is Josh not on? Okay, sorry. I thought that I saw that Josh was on. So Sarah, staying with you then. What is it like, being a union member and working for the union? Now you're not just you're not an industrial painter, like doing the industrial painter work, at least most of the time. You are working for the union, trying to build the union. What is that like in a Southern right to work state?
It's definitely a grind. Right to work laws are designed to keep workers divided and our unions weak. But that's something that we have a really good group, not only with the painters union, but across like the building trades. We're fighting against that, and we're not backing down. And what we're doing is honestly going out, organizing, having those conversations that are not necessarily fun conversations here in the South. They're uncomfortable. We make ourselves comfortable being uncomfortable. So we're doing it one conversation, one worker at a time, one job site at a time. And so just trying to really and truly just educate people on, or just saying, hey, this is, maybe look into this a little more, on your own time if you want to, and make it not as threatening, and just having those conversations, one-on-one conversations with people. So that's we're doing that a lot.
If you had to pick like the anti-union argument that people have sort of that people have kind of absorbed, that seems to be the most effective to them, like what is the number one reason that you find that people are antagonistic towards unions, and what has been the most useful sort of line of conversation to try to disabuse them of that notion?
So the biggest thing that I've heard personally is that, you're going to come on here and you're going to control everything. And that's just the propaganda that the contractor has spread. And there's so much fear mongering and things that go on. But yeah, just the fact that they think that we're going to come in and dictate and control everything. And that is completely the opposite of what, we do. Because we're like, no, we hold people accountable. We have contracts, written contracts, right, that we uphold our end, they uphold theirs. And, just trying to kind of, change the narrative for that, and just showing them that, hey, this is exactly, it's yours. A union is its members. It's a memberships. It's not mine. It's not, just there. It's a collective, and I think people have really forgotten that in the South, that it's what you put into it. It's yours. So I try to get them to understand that, but it's definitely, it is very hard here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when somebody does join the District Council 77, if they're not an experienced painter already, they're going to go into an apprenticeship program, presumably. Can you talk to us about what that looks like, and the length of time, and what sorts of things an apprentice is doing during their program?
Yeah, absolutely. So our apprenticeship, that is really the backbone of everything that we do. And having that, it's where you're working and learning. So, and you don't have to pay anything in while you're doing that. Our program, again, it's a true game changer. And like you said, you don't need experience. We train you. And depending on which craft that you wanted to go into, like for an industrial painter, it is a 3-year program. However, it goes in like 6-month increments. So every 6 months, as long as you meet those, the required hours, you get a raise. And I'm like, I don't know of any other thing you could do where you're guaranteed a raise as long as you're going to your classes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you're earning while you're learning. You get the hands-on training, classroom instruction. You learn the safety tools, surface prep, coatings. You learn all of it, and it's up to standards. You have no student debt, and when you graduate, you're a journeyman. And with the credentials that you get, you can actually travel across the United States if that is something that you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, which was a big perk for me when I initially started. So, yeah, we have a certification training called the Certified Applicator Specialist training. And with that, like, there's places that will actually pay you more for having that on the job. So, and just whatever's negotiated in that contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our print, and I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. I'm just very passionate about our training. But our apprenticeship program for industrial painters is catered to that. So when you complete that, you will have that CAS certification. And it really is. It's awesome. And like, to not have any debt. It's amazing.
Absolutely. The earn and learn nature of the building trade union apprenticeship programs are really exciting. And something that isn't talked about as much is, I think, the ability to move across the country and having that as as something like a safety net. I mean, if you are an electrician, mm-hmm. and you go to like a local contractor and you work for them, if business goes down in your local area and you're working for a local contractor, they lay you off. You don't have, you don't have a literal international organization where you can go and say, hey, work is low in Huntsville, Alabama, or in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Is there work in New York or in Canada? Mm-hmm. where can I find a job to go at for the next 6 months while maybe I wait for work to pick back up in my home city? And so I think that's a really cool, especially, I mean, if you're a young person, and you are interested in traveling. I talked to a fellow who was a pipe fitter, no college degree, and he talked about how he made $250,000 a year in California as a pipe fitter from Huntsville, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
from the local here, and he went out California for a job for a couple of years and made $250,000 each year. So it's a really cool opportunity. What is the compensation package like for a journeyman painter in Alabama and Tennessee if you're part of the if you're part of the union? And can you talk to us about the compensation package during the apprenticeship program?
Yeah, so it just depends on where, like which local that you go to and like which job site that you actually end up going to. So I know that a lot of our projects are working, and it's almost $30 an hour for a journeyman painter. And that's what you see on your check on the hour, right? And that's not like exact for each location, right? But it's upwards of like, it's almost $30, or it could be over $30, and then your benefits package is paid in on top of that. Like, it's not something that is taken, the contractors are paying that in for you. And as an apprentice, you get the same benefits package. Now, you get a lower rate, of course, but you still get that same benefits package, and you're paying in for a pension and also health insurance. So It just depends on the contract, like what the amounts and stuff. So.
Well, Sarah, I really appreciate your time this morning. Enjoyed the conversation. If folks want to become a union painter with IU Pat District Council 77, where do they need to go?
Okay, that's a great question. We want everyone. You can visit www.iupat.org, or you can reach out to. You can just Google like what your local painters union would be. And then, that reps should be listed on there, and you can give them a call.
All right.
So simple as that. Then
Sarah
go online
Reimer,
with the application.
Sarah Reimer, International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 77. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we just wrapped up a conversation with some union painters about being a union painter in the South. You can find that conversation on our YouTube channel, The Valley Labor Report. We are also momentarily going to be talking to workers, video game workers, who have recently unionized and gotten a tentative agreement that will hopefully be industry standard setting. We'll be taking your calls at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And we will be talking about the news, all that and more on today's program. We really appreciate y'all tuning in. You can leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next show as well. And if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We have a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. That is a cool red unionized tee. We have some hats and stickers, tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that at tvlr.fm/contact. And Adam is actually not here today, so I will be adding a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, and we encourage our listeners to check it out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class in the American South. We're hoping that this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us, and with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor, a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what U.S. workers, what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. In the last week, this segment covers May the 24th to the 30th. In new union campaigns, 44 security guards at Speed Art Museum in Louisville, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Security, Police, and Fire Professionals of America. This follows the non-guard workers at the museum filing a petition to unionize with the UAW last week. 180 workers at MV Transportation in San Antonio, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 694. 7 workers at UNFI in Pompano Beach, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 769. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 1, as the union representing 4 workers at Sign Crafters Incorporated in St. Louis, Missouri, and 22 workers at Starbucks in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. In union election results, 3 workers at IMI Kentucky in Edmonton, Kentucky, voted 2-1 against unionization with the Teamsters Local 89. 23 workers at AGL Services Company in Atlanta, Georgia, voted 19-2 in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 1997. 19 workers at Prestige Painting Worldwide in Lee's Summit, Missouri, voted 10-5 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT District Council 3. 10 workers at Allegiant Access Technologies in Louisville, Kentucky, voted 5-5 in a union election with the IBEW Local 369. Ties go to the employer. 13 workers at Davie Tree Expert Company in Huntingdon, Tennessee, voted 8-4 in favor of unionization with the IBEW Local 429. In strikes and bargaining updates, Teamsters, representing 160 drivers at Breakthrough Beverage in Florida, are bargaining their contract as we speak. Workers at 5 locations in the state have recently unionized. The members are expected to take a strike authorization vote next week. Jeff Patarello, director of the Teamsters Brewery, Bakery, and Soft Drink Conference, said they are trying to get these drivers in Florida the same benefits that their other members at Breakthrough have in other states. Despite the state of Alabama not approving a raise for all teachers in the state, some localities are finding room for raises in their budgets, including in Madison County, where I am at, where the local Board of Education last week approved a $1,000 a year raise for all employees. The U.S. Education Department, in the name of protecting women, is, I kid you not, attempting to end protections against pregnancy discrimination for their own workers. The Department of Defense is dropping the stupid "what did you do last week" requirement for civilian employees. 300 quality assurance workers at ZeniMax, unionized as ZeniMax Workers United CWA, have reached a tentative agreement with the company. The first of its kind agreement in the industry includes substantial across-the-board raises, new minimum salaries, protections against arbitrary dismissal, and more, according to the union. The 300 workers are nationwide, including in the South. 14 workers at Alabama Arise, who recently unionized as Alabama Arise Workers United CWA, ratified their first union contract with 100% turnout and a 100% yes vote. In a joint release with management, they say they were able to lock in benefits they already have, secure raises, and 20 weeks of paid parental leave, and more. The VA Secretary, Doug Collins, wants to cut 15% of the VA staff nationwide. That is going to mean 83,000 workers out of a job. The Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, in Austin, Texas, is raising the alarm about bus driver safety after another incident and calling on the city to make changes to protect drivers. The president of the American Association of University Professors, an AFT affiliate, recently went on the Power at Work podcast to discuss how Trump's attacks on universities are affecting the people who make the institutions run. The crew of a Terrence Howard project in Kentucky is on strike as of last week. Terrence Howard, a guy who fancies himself an intellectual. The crew's union, the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, say that despite state funding and contracts with the actors and directors guilds, the crew are being treated as less than employees. Now production is trying to replace the crew for standing up. Drivers for Kroger in Forest Park, Georgia, who last year unionized with Teamsters Local 528, have authorized a strike against the company because they won't offer a fair contract. In the press release, the Teamsters point out that in 2024, the company raked in more than $147 billion in revenue and reported over $2 billion in profits. In political and legislative updates, the American Federation of Government Employees is celebrating beating back some of the worst provisions in the House bill for federal workers, like the proposed retirement cuts, while still raising the alarm about issues that remain and vowing to continue the fight in the Senate. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has opened a probe into the increased backlog at the Social Security Administration that has resulted from the DOGE cuts. Friend of the show, Kim Kelly, reported that 32 MSHA district field offices in 20 states that had been marked for closure received notices that those orders had been canceled. The Mine Safety and Health Administration is important for protecting coal miners across the country. She's been reporting on coal miners for years now. Trump is greenlighting the U.S. Steel Nippon deal, with the United Steelworkers Union remaining extremely skeptical. Trump appointed Alabama utility regulator Twinkle Kavanaugh to a position in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, State Director of Alabama Rural Development. Lee Hedgepeth pointed out for Inside Climate News that during her tenure as president of the Public Service Commission in Alabama, she always approved rate hikes without formal hearings, as is common in other states. Alabamians who get their power from Alabama Power have some of the highest utility bills in the country. The Department of Labor is reportedly ending its Job Corps program, a free residential education and job training program for low-income people between 16 and 24 years old. Labor Secretary Chavez DeRemer says it's because it's not effective, but Republicans and Democratic senators have pushed back against the move, saying that Job Corps centers are important for workforce development in their states. The U.S. Department of Labor's Employee Benefits Security Administration has rescinded guidance discouraging cryptocurrencies in retirement plans. The Supreme Court has allowed Trump to end a temporary humanitarian parole program that allowed 500,000 immigrants to stay in the country legally while the case plays out. This will be devastating for the migrants, obviously, many of whom are union members. The AFL-CIO filed an amicus brief opposing the ending of the program, saying that this program could damage the economy, hurt businesses, and ultimately be detrimental for the co-workers who are left behind, all on top of being cruel and inhumane to the immigrants themselves. Liana Wang has a new piece in On Labor about how the IRS is cooperating with ICE and how that's bad for all workers, in particular pointing out how it might disincentivize immigrants from complying with the tax code, and thus we could lose a major source of revenue. Tommy Tuberville announced he is running for governor of Alabama. He is the clear favorite to win, with no other high-profile Republicans announcing a run. And finally, in internal union affairs, the international president of the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, John Costa, was in the South last week, visiting local 1235 members in Tennessee, working at several key transit hubs across the city of Nashville. Labor Notes has a great podcast out about how to make union meetings more interesting and engaging. They also have a new piece about how engaging critics can build a stronger local union. Finally, they've reposted an older piece about how unions have survived after moving off of paycheck dues deduction, very relevant for federal unions right now. Americans now favor labor unions over business by greater margins than ever before, and the International Association of Machinists, IAM, announced that they are reorganizing and centralizing their organizing department, a move that the union says will help streamline organizing efforts. If we missed something, let us know about your union updates at tvlr.fm/contact, and you can subscribe and get this segment as a newsletter in your email inbox at tvlr.fm. We're going to be talking to a video game worker momentarily. Really excited to have this conversation. The Communication Workers of America say in a press release that in a first for the video game industry, over 300 quality assurance workers working at Microsoft subsidiary ZeniMax Media, who were represented by the CWA locals 2100, 2108, and 6215, also known as ZeniMax Workers United CWA, they announced that they have reached a tentative agreement with the company. ZeniMax Workers United CWA and Microsoft have been negotiating for a first contract for nearly 2 years now. The new contract sets new standards for the industry and includes substantial across-the-board wage increases as well as new minimum salaries for workers. The agreement also includes protections against arbitrary dismissal, grievance procedures, and a crediting policy that clearly acknowledges the QA workers' contributions to the video games that they help create. It also incorporates a previously announced agreement on how artificial intelligence is introduced and implemented in the workplace. Some members are quoted in the press release. I'm really excited to have one of those members on the show with us right now, Jesse Lease, member of the ZeniMax Workers United CWA Bargaining Committee. Jesse, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. This is really exciting, and just to help people kind of know who the company is, what y'all do, can you talk about ZeniMax Studios and maybe any games that ZeniMax has been a part of that folks might recognize?
Yeah, absolutely. So ZeniMax QA, we perform QA work on the projects of Bethesda Game Studios, id Studios in Texas, and ZeniMax Online Studios, which is the studio responsible for bringing you Elder Scrolls Online. That's the MMO associated with the Elder Scrolls games. So we test and assist in developing these video games and the software that these games are run on as well. We work
Fantastic. Yeah,
on the
go ahead.
Fallout series. We work on the Elder Scrolls games, including ESO, the Doom series, Wolfenstein, and lots others. But I've personally put a lot of work into Starfield. I was really excited to be a part of that launch.
Very, very cool. And so when you're talking about QA, quality assurance, what does that look like? What kind of work goes into quality assurance on video games?
Yeah, so we will get the project, whether that be the video game itself or content that is going into the game. So it could be a patch or DLC content as well. And we go through, we test this content, we identify issues with the content, so like bugs, and we will write issues for this and report back to the developer side of things. The Bethesda Game Studios is also the name of the studio that has all of the designers. So we'll report back to the designers and the producers and tell them the issues with the games so that they can be refined for launch or for continued use.
And I've seen a couple of mentions of like first in the industry. Are most video game quality assurance workers not unionized at this point?
Yes, I would say the majority of video game workers are not unionized at this point. But the I think that having a couple large groups of quality assurance workers who were ready to kind of start to break the mold and blaze the trails a little bit has caused way for a lot of other groups to be able to be like, all right, you know what, it's time. We're going to take control of our industry, before it gets washed over with corporate greed and AI and things that we can't control.
Right. And now workers at ZeniMax unionized about 2 years ago, I guess. If you've been negotiating with the contract for 2 years, that's probably about when you unionized. Were you a part of that campaign? Have you been working for ZeniMax long enough to have been a part of that campaign?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we have been in active negotiations since I want to say April 24th of 2023. So it's like 25 months or something like that at this point. Quite a long time. And initially, I'll explain this in a minute, but I was not able to be a part of the original campaign to organize the QA union. But what I understand from the organizing process, from what I hear, is that it was really a death of a thousand cuts situation. They were fighting issues like lack of transparency, low wages, no protections for layoffs or AI. Those are a few of the reasons that really drove them to finally put in the work and organize quite a large, like you said, we're I think 330 plus people in our unit currently. But the reason that I couldn't initially be a part of it is because I am a contracted QA tester. And that puts me in a different class, right? So when they initially started their bargaining process, we still had a lot of worries as contracted QA testers doing many of the same duties, sometimes going above and beyond, doing senior duties to try to prove ourselves to guarantee potential long-term careers with Bethesda and ZeniMax, right? And we had a lot of consistent issues with ambiguity about the process. A lot of people will, if they've had experience working as a contractor in actually several different industries, sometimes there's a lack of transparency and ambiguity that's really damaging to a person's overall ability to function in that job and look to the future. So in our case, they didn't have didn't have end dates on paper that they were willing to give us for when our contract would expire. So we would ask again and again when we would inevitably not have work there anymore, and they would tell us that they had no idea. And that is very worrying over time, as you continue to contribute to a project, getting more nervous, wondering when they might just tell you that you're done. So the bargaining process had started at QA, and they were a couple months into that process, and it was the summer of 2023, and we really realized as contractors that we needed to do this ourselves. So we contacted CWA, and we started having some meetings. I was a part of those initial meetings as a contractor, where we talked about the way that we would organize the entire population of contracted testers within that ZeniMax QA group. And then something wild happened. We were only a few weeks into our meetings when our greatest fear finally occurred, and a couple of our contractor friends, people who had really contributed large amounts to Starfield, right before the launch, they were told that they weren't going to have jobs anymore, and they only had a couple weeks. And they were even told that because of the lining up of the dates, they couldn't even attend the Starfield launch party, right?
Wow.
And we were devastated. And so we went from having the organizing process be something that we were doing kind of in between all of the stress that we had about, we don't know if we are going to have permanent careers here, to being like, no, this is the path, this is what we need to do. And in less than a week, I'm proud to say that many meetings yielded a over 70% supermajority. We went from having just a small group of contractors who knew about the unionizing situation to that number in less than a week. And it was just because of how much people cared about those workers that were going to be losing their jobs, and how much they wanted to protect themselves from these types of things happening in the future. I'm really proud of the work that we did to win that union. And actually, as a result, those two people were offered their jobs back by Microsoft.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
that is so
yeah.
exciting. And I know that must feel incredible for you, and to have been able to be a part of that. And, I think that that's something that, I wanted to talk about, this feeling kind of even just in the context of bargaining, but a feeling of power over the place where you work is something that so many workers, most workers in this country, do not get to have, because they're not part of unions, and they ultimately, they do have power, but they are not exercising it, and they're not able to, they're not using it in the way that y'all did, and were able to bring back on folks who were fired or who were laid off. And you were talking about, some of the problems at your workplace, but that's not just limited to, ZeniMax workers or contracted ZeniMax workers, right? I mean, this is like a really industry-wide problem in the video game industry, and not even just relegated to quality assurance workers in the video game industry. Definitely. I mean, like, video game development has been degrading as a job prospect for people. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that it's a really good, that's a really good point to make, because game workers in general, right, but QA especially, we're often underappreciated, and we're underpaid for our labor. Because if you think about the level of profit that we're talking about, video games have been the most profitable part of the entertainment industry for a long time now, and it's by a landslide. It's by so much money, and you would expect to see some of that money reflected in the people who are producing the products, but that's not the case. And a lot of the time, because there are few and far between positions where people are able to work on these video games, their passion, their joy, their love for the game truly is taken advantage of. And that's a real shame. But I think that the silver lining of that is that when groups of people in this industry have felt a lot of weight of capitalism, of greed, of being exploited for the things that they do best, that makes them that much more right for the protections of many, many marginalized groups. I can give examples from our contracts, our current TA, that we have some really stunning language to protect groups like immigrant workers, our LGBTQ plus workers, our disabled workers, having provisions in place that will allow workers, even protected classes that we maybe don't think of as protected, like parents, right? There's a lot of things that these groups of people really need to have in terms of options, and being able to make headway for that, I think, is something that that is already on our minds because we have been othered in other ways. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done, and I'm proud of this collective of workers who has never wavered from standing up for each other and finding all of the small issues that really keep a larger group of people down and amplifying those voices so that we all get what we need.
I want to talk some about those provisions in the contract that you're really proud of, but first I want to walk through some of the logistics of bargaining a union contract, right? I mean, we talk about this. Our listeners are presumably going to be familiar with what a union contract is, and we've went through the logistics before, but it bears repeating because it is such a unique experience in the United States to have been able to sit across from your boss as an equal, bargaining over what are going to be the conditions of the place where you're going to spend, the majority of your waking life. And so how does that work? How were you selected or elected? It's different in different unions. How
Right.
were you how did you come to be on the bargaining team? How did your team decide what issues to prioritize at the bargaining table? What was bargaining like? Just walk us through all of that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So we did have a more formal election process for the majority of our bargaining team. So they had a period of time where they had, I guess, a short campaign, and the unit members went through and voted in our bargaining committee members. I did not see that process, one, partially because of the contractor situation I explained before. I was not a part of the union at that time. But when I did join, because as the contractor union was one, we decided to marry into the larger union to have even larger worker power overall and be able to join their existing bargaining table. When we did that, we added a couple people from the contractor group to the bargaining table as representatives from my contractor union. As a result of some initial bargaining that took place, those two contractors were actually converted to full-time positions. We got Microsoft to agree to convert them, which was amazing. As a result of that, though, we had no one at the table who was truly representing the contractor population, who did not have job security, who did not have a contract end date on paper and were currently under status quo. And our union thought that that was an issue. We wanted to make sure that we were authentically representing all of the voices in our unit. And at the time, I was very heavily involved in the organizing of the contractor union, and the other contractors who had organized the union decided that they wanted me as their representative. So I joined the bargaining table, and I have been bargaining with them for a little over a year and a half of the 25 months that we've been at the table. Going over the way that we went to find the issues to bargain over, we when we really prioritize trying to make sure that communication stayed as fluid as possible. And it's, of course, it can be a clunky process in some ways, but as long as we really have a priority on making sure that that the communication is flowing, I think that that's a huge part of this. So initially, when bargaining began, we had surveys that went out to all the members that had them kind of rank their top issues, and also gave a lot of room for discussion about some of these issues. And we were able to construct a plan moving forward on which issues we were going to strategically try to push to the top. And we were also able to get a lot of permissive subjects. So rather than the mandatory subjects of bargaining that the company is obligated to bargain with you over, there are many permissive subjects that Microsoft was actually willing to bargain with us over, and we got really wonderful deals on, like the crediting that you mentioned and the AI protections. I could talk about that a little bit later too. But lastly, I just wanted to say, for the overall process, it is really surreal at first to be sitting at the table with your bosses, especially in our case. ZeniMax Media got purchased by Microsoft. Bethesda, the entire thing got purchased by Microsoft a couple years ago. And so because of that, my ZeniMax management is not the only representatives at the bargaining table. It is also Microsoft's legal team and the people that Microsoft wants to send out to handle these negotiating situations. They have the final call when it comes to these things. And I mean, Microsoft's lawyers make more money than I've ever seen, right? It's hard to really put into words the Goliath that it feels like you are up against when you are first initially sitting down. But I have to tell you that we really did quickly find our voice. And I think that what we did is really focused on trying to become the embodiment of all of the voices of our union. And as long as we were reflecting the feelings that we were seeing, that we were hearing people expressing with much gusto, as long as I felt like I was always properly reflecting those feelings, I felt like we were doing a good job. And I think that we were able to do that pretty successfully early on. And I am glad that it allowed us to create a foundation of being able to bargain with them. It's definitely the most satisfying work ever. It's also very, very hard work. I have a friend who said, I heard him say that activism is active, right? And that can be one of the most difficult parts, is that there's a lot of labor behind what needs to get done. But the reality is, as soon as you're seeing it, as soon as you're seeing those new standards get written in stone, and this is going to be new provisions that are going to improve the lives of both current workers and future workers to come that aren't even with the company, that makes it so worth it. Going back and being able to say, all right, we started with no protections in place, with no voice, with no ability to really make any changes, or to keep in place to codify the things that we do love about our job. And now we're able to do all those things. And so I think that, at first it feels like you are sitting there at the bargaining table with people that are made to do that, right? They're people that are getting paid to look at the money and to look at these things and to make decisions. But you, as a worker, are not any less ready for the bargaining table than the people sitting across from you. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. You are there because the love and the care that you have for your own work experience and the work experiences of all of your coworkers is what fuels your ability to do all of these amazing things. And I don't need a law degree or, or a ton of experience with bargaining tables to be able to sit down in these meetings with my employer and say, you know what, our workers deserve to have these standards, and we're going to come to those agreements. At the end of the day, they're still human beings, and we're able to have those conversations like human beings.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And it does kind of, it is interesting how you mentioned that, working people, just normal folks are able to do this. And it does kind of really put the lie to the idea that, oh, these big fancy lawyers are really actually worth millions of dollars when people who are not, video game workers, machinists, iron workers, truck drivers, we can sit across the table and do the same thing as effectively, and yet we don't get millions of dollars. Like, there's literally nobody on our side of the table making millions of dollars to do this kind of stuff. We do it in our spare time, and we beat the bosses. It's, it is really cool.
That's
so
right.
what are some of the things in your contract that you that you are most proud of being able to win?
Yeah, I have a few. So you mentioned before the AI protections. We have actually some press releases that you can find pretty easily if you're interested in reading some details about those AI protections that actually have some of the language. And essentially what we're saying with AI is that this is a technology that is not it's not completely solved, right? This is not something that we as a society have all of the answers locked in for yet. And because of that, what we need to make sure is the case is at the base level, workers are not replaced by these programs. Can they utilize them? Yes. Can we learn how to incorporate programs like this over time if they do improve the basis of our work? Of course. But should we allow for gaps in language where workers can be outright replaced by a program? No, we don't think that is good or right. And so that is what this the AI protections proposal was able to capture. I'm really proud of that. I wanted to mention transparency in methodology as one of our, that was a big reason why we organized, and then also a big thing that we're looking forward to in the contract is really being able to understand the processes by which management is conducting their promotional processes, the way that things are happening internally, and there's something that you're able to have as a union member, which is a request for information. And this is really, really valuable to people in tech and people in the game industry in general. The idea that you're able to request the ways by which your employer is coming to certain conclusions if it is impacting the workplace in any way. Really just being able to understand the process and not feel like things are being kept from you as a worker is, I think, something several industries can relate to, but it's definitely a really big deal in tech. Outsourcing limitations, we honestly have similar ideas about this that we do with AI. Outsourcing, there's a time and a place for it, but we don't believe that outsourcing should cause American jobs to be lost. So we have limitations in our contract for outsourcing where the company is allowed to do it, but they also cannot outsource in order to replace work that would normally be going to the bargaining unit. So it's really, really valuable that we know that we're not going to be replaced with outsourced workers, we can utilize them, but it's not going to take over. Wage increases up front. You mentioned that we have new minimum amounts for workers, but then also the ability to be seeing money right away in the contract after bargaining for 25 months is something that's really, really valuable to these workers. Them being able to see the fruits of their labor with all of the mobilization efforts that we've put into this unionization process, and finally seeing some relief on the cost of living situation, as it can be really, really difficult to just try to survive on lower wages, of course. Guaranteed and generous severance is actually something I wrote down, because that is really huge. Layoffs are a huge stain on our industry. They continue to be a huge threat. And the reality is we have to be ready for possibilities of reductions in force. And as much as it's horrible to even think about the idea that we would have any softness to the landing and be able to plan for our next thing better in a situation where a reduction would be necessary, that's really, really huge for us. So the severance packages that are guaranteed for any reduction that would potentially take place are actually quite generous. I can't go over exact details of numbers, but we're really happy with the way that those look.
That's another thing that's like really underappreciated. You know, people talk about union contracts and you know, it's not, and there's a certain reason that you want to be kind of like hesitant about, oh, we got really great, you know, severance packages for layoffs, but layoffs happen in union and non-union workplaces. But in union workplaces with a union contract, you get to have a say over how layoffs happen, over the process by which it's decided who is going to be laid off, over the severance packages they get, over like what kind of landing they're going to have when layoffs ultimately happen. And if you're in a non-union workplace, it's all at the whim of a boss. And I am very uncomfortable with situations like that, where I have to rely on somebody's charity to give me a severance package. And so you don't have to rely on that anymore. And we're really, really excited about that. Jesse Lease, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. If there are other video game workers out there listening right now and they'd like to have a union contract, how can they get in touch with you or the CWA?
Yeah, of course. So this is a little bit of a two-parter. If you are hearing all of this and you've already been thinking about unionizing your workplace and you're ready to go, CWA-union.org is where you can get in touch with our campaign organizers, our people who are able to get you started with that process. It's a phenomenal journey that I can't recommend enough. It's been life-changing for me in so many ways, and will continue to be for our industry and so many industries out there. And then the other thing is, if you are not someone who believes that you are prepared for undergoing an entire union campaign at your workplace, but you are a video game professional and you want to get started in some way, we are really, really excited that we have gotten to get started with the United Video Game Workers. They launched their union a couple months ago. This is a direct join union. So if you are a video game professional and you are an independent contractor, or you are a professional who is currently unemployed, or you are part of a workplace that is not ready to be unionized yet, then you are able to become a union worker right now by going to uvw-cwa.org. And you can get signed up immediately as a union worker. And this is a fantastic way to to connect with other video game professionals and figure out what it is that we need to be pushing for in our industry the hardest. So yeah, I'm really happy that we were able to have this opportunity to talk today, and I appreciate the time.
Jesse Lease, member of the ZeniMax Workers United CWA bargaining team. ZeniMax Studios does quality assurance work on games such as Elder Scrolls and others. Jesse, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Bosswatch. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. He is out today because he's got to work. What's the deal with that? That's crazy. got a union job working on a Saturday. Maybe he can fix that in his next contract. Appreciate everybody tuning in today. Go ahead and like the stream. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. If you're listening to us on the radio, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to be continuing for a whole second half of the program on Facebook and YouTube, where we will be talking about the U.S. Steel Nippon deal that Trump has been talking about over the last week. Also going to be talking about Medicaid work requirements and why they're dumb. They're dumb. They're not smart. But first, we're going to wrap up the first half of the show, and we're going to do that with Bosswatch. We're going to start right here in Alabama, where WAFF reports on a Lauderdale County grand jury indicting a former fast food manager on 26 counts of child sex abuse related charges. Garrett Wilkins of Florence was arrested after being located in Salt Lake City, Utah by the U.S. Marshals last week and was transported back to Florence. Police say Wilkins had a sexual relationship with a 15-year-old employee. Investigators say they discovered that the two had a sexual relationship and also exchanged explicit images and videos. Wilkins is facing 10 counts of production of obscene material of a child under 17, 10 counts of possession of obscene material of a child under 17, 2 counts of transmitting obscene material to a child, 2 counts of sexual abuse in the second degree, electronic solicitation, and enticement of a child for immoral purposes. Wilkins remains in the Lauderdale County Jail on a $3.6 million bond. It's worth noting that, and I'm going away from the WAFF reporting now, it's worth noting that despite everybody thinking that fast food is just work for children, that's where children should work. We want to send we want our 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds to get work experience. We don't want them going into the coal mines. They should go work at a fast food restaurant. That's kind of what people think about fast food, that it's a safe industry. The restaurant industry literally has the highest incidence rate of all industries for sexual harassment and assault. There is no industry in which you are more likely to be sexually harassed and assaulted than restaurants. So, you should be careful about sending your kids to restaurants because it's actually dangerous work. Something like 70% of women who work in restaurants for any length of time have reported being sexually harassed or assaulted. We're going to get to more Bosswatch stories in overtime, but because we are running out of time here on the first half of the program, we're going to do Union Busters. This segment of Bosswatch covers national updates. It's sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor and sharing them with people. Information is power. The new filings from last week include Van Lee Hospitality Holdings in California. They hired LRI Consulting Services for $425 an hour. Escalante Concrete in Arizona hired Flores Labor Relations for $250 an hour. Carlos Flores, the CEO of Flores Labor Relations, which is a union-busting firm founded in 2016 and based in Temecula, California. Carlos Flores, prior to working there, was a Teamsters shop steward. In addition, the following filings were amended. The Cummings Group amended their filing for statewide conditioning to add their compensation rate of nearly $4,000 a day. As a reminder, due to a lack of enforcement, some labor relations consultants may disregard the law and fail to report their activities to the U.S. Department of Labor. Therefore, it's crucial for organizers and workers to report suspected persuader activity to the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Labor Management Standards. You can do that via email at olms-public@dol.gov or by calling 202-693-0123. If you need any assistance with that, you can contact Labor Lab at contact@laborlab.us. We appreciate everybody tuning in today. As always, folks, check out Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a sponsor of the show, labornotes.org. They have great articles, great events coming up, and always good training and stuff there. Particularly, like I mentioned in Last Week in Southern Labor, they got a new podcast out about how to make union meetings engaging, entertaining, and relevant for people. That's something that a lot of unions are not where they need to be on. So check it out, Labor Notes, labornotes.org. We're going to go into the second half of the program. We're going to be talking to Sam Sachs, host of Means Morning News on means.tv, about the news, also reacting to the Missouri governor potentially repealing sick leave and stuff. So stay tuned for that. We're going to take a break, go into the second half of the show. If you don't follow us online, Facebook or YouTube, then we'll see you next week. All right. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody for staying tuned. 844-899-TVLR. We'll take some phone calls at the top of the second half of the show. So if you want to call in, now's the time to do it. You got to get in line. Otherwise, we're going to... Sam Sachs will be coming on at 11:15. So you want to get in line now if you want to call in. We'd love to hear from you on any of the things that we've talked about in the show today. Or if you have questions. Or if you have a suggestion. 844-899-8857. Going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party aged
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. You can also leave a voicemail at any time throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the YouTube chat. Benjo, Amanda, DL Cindero, and Jada say good morning. Brandon says good morning, fellow workers, and congratulations on the new unionized Starbucks in Huntsville. Yes, really excited about that. Steve says good morning from Atlanta. And speaking of Atlanta, Steve, I think I saw something about a unionized Starbucks in Atlanta closing. So I wonder if you've seen that. Steve also says, for politicians with no money, Kate Abu-Ghazaleh in Chicago is doing a very grassroots campaign where her strategy is her events are mutual aid events. That's really cool. You can find her on YouTube at Kat M. Abu. Seen her on Twitter a few times. One more Atlanta question for you, Steve. Kelsey Bond is running for Atlanta City Council, DSA member, and it looks like she has some momentum, too. The Atlanta DSA has already elected a member to the state legislature. I think his name was Gabriel. So I wonder what you make of that campaign, Kelsey Bond's campaign for City Council, if you've seen it. Fit Over 50 says, good morning. Palace Rill says, we got a floating head talking on the program. That's a camouflage joke. Very funny. Plant Powered Radio says, I love this podcast. Do you ever inform regarding worker cooperatives? We don't talk a whole lot about worker cooperatives, you know. I do think they're good. I think they're good, and I think they're important, and I think that they can serve as something of a prefigurative political program, but also living in a capitalist society, the cooperatives do not come in, they don't create as much opportunity for class conflict and class antagonisms as do unions. And so I think unions are really important for, societally, bringing out those tensions and stoking conflict with, the capitalists, and informing people about, their status as workers, and really making that divide clear. Whereas, cooperatives, everybody becomes a worker owner. And, if that's, that's obviously kind of the ideal situation, is that you are you are a worker owner, and so we've talked about it some, and we've had some people who are active in like co-op spaces before, and I'm sure we will again, and it's useful to point to for sure, but we're unionists, and so we kind of we talk about unions a little more. Had a lot of love for Jesse in the chat from Tori and Patrick. Palace says developers is such a volatile career. It seems like you hear that all the time, that whole studios get shut down. Yeah, I don't follow it a whole lot, but I have seen some of the, just in the industry, it seems like video game work is pretty rough. Adam says, good morning, folks. Here in Gary, Nippon has promised so much to the city, but based on market conditions, yeah, that's the big thing. Palace Real says, you're just a lowly fast food worker. You shouldn't make a living wage. You shouldn't be treated with respect, and you shouldn't be made to feel and you should be made to feel terrible for working here. Yeah, it's and then goes on to say, I hate how the world treats some jobs. It's really, really bad. Yeah, it's awful how people think about fast food jobs, how people treat fast food workers. It's terrible. Steve says the first unionized Starbucks is closing. They're saying the lease is up. Yeah. Terrible, terrible, terrible. River Valley Runner says rank and file letter carrier out of Central Connecticut Branch 20 here just moved to an S&DC and not the biggest fan. S&DC is a sort and distribution center. We've had some letter carriers call in about sort and distribution centers before, and those are seems like there are mixed feelings about that. And then Steve says, I know who Kelsey is. Met her at a Labor Notes event here. Gabriel shows up to the AFL-CIO meetings. Okay, cool. Yeah, we might try to get Kelsey on the program at some point. Would be interested in hearing about her campaign. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. While we wait to talk to Sam, we're going to be bringing him on in about 5 minutes. We got a couple other Bosswatch stories here in Alabama. Staying in Alabama, an employee, this is from AL.com, an employee of a nonprofit that helps resettle refugees in Alabama has lost her job after speaking out publicly against her employer's decision to help resettle Afrikaners in the state. Yasmin Othman, a former employment specialist with Inspiritus, said she was fired on May 21st for speaking with AL.com for a story published the week before about the arrival of several families from South Africa in Alabama. She told AL.com in mid-May, I feel it's disrespectful to the refugees that we are assisting and helping that are running from violence and forced displacement to be helping this population. A week later, Othman, 27, lost her job. She said her employer told her it was because she violated policy by speaking to the media and because she had continued to try to convince her coworkers to resist the group's decision to help Afrikaners. While the Episcopalian Church decided not to help resettle the Afrikaners due to moral objections and shuttered its decades-old resettlement efforts nationwide, Inspiritus, which is based in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, opted to work with the administration. We are mandated to serve all refugees, no matter how they arrive, Liz Kurtz, the Alabama refugee coordinator for Inspiritus, said earlier this month. Othman said her employer told her that they had no choice but to participate in the program in hopes that Trump would allow other refugees to resume entering the U.S. She said she felt ethically obligated to share her criticisms with the media, and so she spoke with AL.com for an article. On May 21st, Othman was fired. That day, she said a person with a local business stopped by the office and said they would like to hire Afrikaners, but not non-English speaking refugees who they did not want to, quote, babysit. So she said she felt she had an ethical responsibility to speak up. I would really encourage folks to read the full AL.com piece, which includes important context about the white South Africans if you aren't familiar with the situation. Heading over to Florida, the U.S. Department of Labor has cited the Salvation Army after a 54-year-old maintenance worker suffered fatal injuries following a fall while working at an Orlando donation center and store in November of 2024. An investigation by the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration found the worker was repairing a roof leak when the fall occurred on November 7th. OSHA cited the Salvation Army for a repeat violation of exposing workers to fall hazards. A similar citation was previously issued at the employer's Princeton, West Virginia location in January of 2020. OSHA also cited this company for 5 serious violations, including failure to assess workplace hazards, provide fall protection training, and ensure proper machine guarding. 2 other than serious violations were issued for failing to report the fatality to OSHA within 8 hours of the incident and lacking a hazard communication program. The Salvation Army will pay $120,000 in penalties to address the violations. Staying in Florida, the U.S. Department of Labor has recovered about $600,000 in back wages and damages for 419 workers after a federal investigation found a Leesburg-based employer failed to pay workers all of their required overtime wages. An investigation by the department's Wage and Hour Division determined Amtex NMS Incorporated, operating as Southeast Modular Manufacturing, violated the Fair Labor Standards Act, the overtime provisions, by not paying workers time and a half their regular rate for all hours over 40 in a work week. Specifically, its rounding methods improperly reduced hours that resulted in unpaid overtime for hours worked over 40 per work week. Investigators also discovered the employer violated federal record-keeping requirements by failing to maintain complete and accurate records of workers' wages and hours. I believe we have Sam Sachs in the Zoom now. Sam is the host of Means Morning News on Means TV. Sam, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. It's great to have you.
Hey, Jacob. It's good to be on finally.
Yeah, been watching Means Morning News for a long time. I think Adam listens to it more regularly than I do. But I've been following Means TV. I think that I have been on and off a member of Means TV like since it started. And I actually remember being made aware of it because the folks who started Means TV got their start doing AOC's campaign, right? Like, isn't that how they kind of got big?
Yeah, Nick and Naomi, they're the co-founders of the co-op, and they launched a fundraiser, I think in 2018 or 2019, but it brought a lot of exposure to the project when they did do an ad for her campaign, which ended up helping her win. But it was always an interesting idea that Nick had. I met Nick when he would record podcast shows for the Street Fight guys. This was back when I would do live shows with Brett and Brian from Street Fight, and we went on a tour of the South with the Trillbillies. And Nick was the videographer for the whole thing, and this was in late 2019, I guess. And that's around when I had met Nick and sort of pitched him on doing a morning show for Means TV because they were just about to launch the whole thing. They had just started populating the site with various documentaries and figuring out what sort of original content they were going to debut when the site first went live.
Yeah, it's really great. Definitely encourage folks to become a subscriber, become a member of Means TV. You can do that at means.tv and use the promo code TVLR for 20% off your first month or your first year if you get an annual subscription.
That's right. You guys are on there now, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We've been on there now for about a month.
Yeah, this is the thing that's good about Means TV is it's a platform where a bunch of leftist creators can gather. And I think that the left media in a lot of ways today so splintered because there isn't huge pockets funding what we do because what we do is adversarial to them. So that leaves us all kind of siloed off from each other, whether it's on Patreon or on YouTube or Twitch or wherever. We have to build our own little shows and try to find our own little audience who's willing to contribute to our projects. And it's tough to find, it's tough to ask people to pay $5, $10 or whatever for each individual show that they want to listen to or project they want to be a part of. So I think Means TV is trying to build something bigger where we can all be in it together, share the gains from any successes from it, not have to compete against each other for audiences, but kind of build a platform where left media can exist without too much financial strain.
Yeah, it's a really cool project. We're really excited to be a part of it, and look forward to staying a part of it for a long time, hopefully, Lord willing. And so, I wanted to talk to you about some of the news of the day, but before we do that, I want to stay on, you biographically for a little bit. Can you talk to the audience about how you came to your politics? I mean, you do a politics show now on a left-wing streaming company, and so what are you sort of like a red diaper baby, or were you a convert? I guess
I wasn't a red diaper baby. I mean, I always had parents that they're liberals. My dad has been a Democrat his whole life. I think, like a lot of young people, you sort of get exposed to left-leaning thought through art and music and movies and reading. I got a degree in philosophy, which exposed me to a lot of left-wing anti-capitalist thinkers. But those ideas that get planted in your mind at a young age through exposure to that stuff end up getting confirmed through your material experiences with the world as you get older. So whether it's a job you have, or watching friends or loved ones try to navigate the U.S. healthcare system, or just being inundated on a daily basis. I mean, I work in news, so I see a lot of it with just the destruction and exploitation that capitalism is causing on a daily basis. It affects you. I mean, I think everyone on the left is fundamentally empathetic, and it's hard to turn that stuff off. So it ends up affecting your politics. And, to me, the answer has always been we have to build a new society that isn't run by profit, that the public owns, as Lenin would say, the commanding heights of the economy, whether that be, extractive industries, banking, transportation, social services, education, that sort of stuff. Now, how we get there, what exactly it'll look like, I have ideas, but I'm not as committed to those. So, for now, I'm just trying to interpret the news and events happening around us in a way that highlight this constant struggle that, whether people realize it or not yet, if you're in the working class, you're a part of.
Right. Yeah, that's a very similar sort of perspective, for me currently is I have some thoughts, but ultimately, I'm more concerned about directionally, where are we going and what can we do to move in the right direction rather than, exactly what does my utopia look like. I don't spend just a whole lot of time thinking about that. But the material conditions, I think, were really important for me as I kind of came to my politics. I was politicized in like 2015, like a lot of people my age. And as I was, at the same time, I was listening to Bernie, and I was trying to read and learn about politics and learn about, people on the left and learn about people on the right at that time. I came out of a conservative family. And so I was still, I was like, I was still trying to kind of find my way. But at the same time, I was working in a restaurant, right? And I just talked in Bosswatch about how, just last week, a grand jury indicted a fast food manager for sexually abusing a child that was working for him in Alabama. And, thankfully, I didn't have anything like that happen at the restaurant that I worked at. But it sucked. It was super hard work. And it was hard for me, and it was difficult, and it was really like strenuous, and I didn't make much money. But ultimately, when I was working there, I was still living at home and like not paying bills, and I was trying to get money to fuck around on the weekends, right? I was the only person that was the case. Everybody else was trying to pay rent, put food on the table, take care of children, working in a hole-in-the-wall podunk burger joint in Alabama. And so, I looked at that, and I felt at the time very, very strongly that it was fundamentally unfair that these people who are working so hard, are so economically precarious. And that feeling is made all the more. I feel that all the more even as I am no longer economically precarious. I have had a good union job my whole career. I've always had healthcare. I've always had a retirement plan. All of those kinds of things, and I'm not economically precarious, and that's bullshit, right? Like, why should I get that, and then other people who work as harder than I do don't. And that's really kind of fundamentally, I think, sort of the genesis of my politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's, just because if we individually are doing okay, like I said, I think fundamentally everyone on the left is empathetic, and it's hard to ignore what's happening around us, especially in our country, especially as it deteriorates even further. And I mean, to me, it's always been obvious, I guess, not always, but to me nowadays, it's obvious what the problems are. And um, and I can't turn that off. So, that affects my politics, and it's led me, down a career path. I'm not saying that I think a lot of us are putting in work every day to live our lives the way that our politics are aligned. And I obviously have a lot of work to do on that and stuff, but, I've tried to at least, in my careers, pursue platforms where I can talk about these things without compromising myself. So I've been pretty lucky to be able to do that too.
Right. And so, speaking about your job professionally, I don't know how much of your kind of professional life is centered around Means Morning News, but on that program, how do you decide what to talk about? That's something that Adam and I wrestle with a lot for our program, because there is so much happening, and there's so much that is worthy of being talked about, and so and also you have to kind of there's a game of like, how do I get people to listen to the stuff that maybe they wouldn't be interested in if it didn't come attached to something else that's a little bit more clickbaity or in the mainstream. How do you make those sort of editorial decisions?
It's not easy. I mean, especially nowadays, it does seem a bit like a fire hose when you're trying to figure out what to pick out. With Means Morning News, I like to do a combination of both the stories that people are seeing on their evening news, but relayed to them in a way that I feel is more accurate, or that highlights more the class struggle at work, along with other news that they aren't seeing that is not being reported around. So I try to find a balance in those two stories. There's often lots of information that comes out of the federal government in the forms of Inspector General reports, GAO reports, that a lot of major news outlets don't pick up on, that you can find some interesting information in to relay. But yeah, I mean, it has been a lot tougher these days, and with the genocide in Gaza, which is, I think, rightfully consuming so much attention in left-wing media. It's hard to, and Means Morning News is about a 15 to 20-minute show every morning, because really it is just, me and with a little bit of help at headquarters. But we do have limited space, and whatever I don't get to, I can talk about tomorrow. I don't, try to be like breaking news or anything like that. This is very much an analysis show, and we do try to like bring news that people aren't listening to it as well. But it's tough. I guess I just try to, we have certain beats when it comes to anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism, which, we talk a lot about labor organizing, union busters, defense spending, expanding the social welfare state, corruption. So I think that there's probably a wheelhouse of stories that we sort of stick to. But I like to, things can get pretty gloomy. So, I'll try to mix in some softer stories as well.
Is there anything that you think that folks should be paying attention to that maybe aren't being talked about enough in particular?
That's a good question. There is, I mean, just the the open corruption now that has taken place, that, I mean, our government has always been corrupt, but it's been taken to a new level right now. The targeting, to me, the other than the genocide in Gaza that's happening, which took place under the Biden administration as well, to me, the most frightening stuff happening is the crackdown on pro-Palestinian speech that's now been expanded to all foreign students. It's now being expanded to Chinese students, combined with the mass deportation efforts against essentially non-white people. If you've had some judicial interventions that have been able to slow it down, otherwise, you probably have hundreds of thousands of people who would have been deported by now, but that's the ultimate goal here. And I'm not sure how long the courts can continue to rein that in. These are some pretty dark times on those fronts, some of the most fascistic things that seem to be happening in the country.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I mean, it's definitely for sure mostly non-white, but I mean, I don't know. There was a story recently out of Mississippi where there was this Danish guy who there was a paperwork error, and he was going in for what he thought was his naturalization interview. He'd been in the country for 10 years, has 5 U.S. citizen children, and went in for what he thought was his naturalization interview. The last communication that he had only a couple of weeks before from USCIS was that he has no outstanding documents. That was a quote from a communication that he got from U.S. the immigration thing. And they arrested him because he missed a paperwork thing back in 2018, and he had that outstanding, and he's still in detention right now, and will likely be deported. And obviously, I mean, that sort of stuff is happening all over the place to brown folks and non-white folks.
There's such pressure to get those deportation numbers up that inevitably it's going to sweep in all sorts of people, including U.S. citizens. And you've seen, I think, upwards of 10 U.S. citizen children who've been deported through this campaign. So, it's disturbing stuff.
It's really bleak, and the Supreme Court just, I think it was yesterday or Thursday, allowed Trump to begin deporting the 500,000 people who were here on temporary humanitarian parole. I was proud of the AFL-CIO for filing an amicus brief on behalf of the immigrants. So that was good. The AFL-CIO has generally been pretty good about immigrants. And there's the CWA locals in Kentucky who represent thousands of people at a GE industrial park, have also done a lot of work for their members, many of whom are on that humanitarian parole. Are there any news stories that you're tracking that make you a little bit more hopeful that you think folks ought to know about?
Well, it's been a few months, but the whole UAW organizing campaign in the South. I'm looking forward to more development. I mean, every day you hear of new Starbucks cafes still being unionized. That's still going on. I genuinely think that before anything can happen in this country, we have to get union rates up.
Right.
And whether that's and then once that's happened, you need the power to be utilized, and whether that's through Sean Fain planning for a 2028 general strike and trying to get contracts aligned through that, or something else. I think that there are effective resistance movements happening within the working class that do offer some salvation in this moment. But like I said, things are pretty dark right now, so you really have to seek out the good news.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the news, and this news is maybe it's good news. I'm still kind of looking at it skeptically. I'm talking about the U.S. Steel and Nippon partnership is what they're calling it. Last year, both Biden and Trump were firmly against the deal. Republicans and Democrats in Pennsylvania were firmly against the deal. The international union that represents workers at U.S. Steel was firmly against the deal. And, you know, some of that was on sort of nationalistic grounds, but a lot of that was centered around concerns that Nippon would not actually invest in U.S. steel manufacturing facilities, that it would go on a union-busting spree and things like that. Particularly, you know, those were the concerns from the unions. And now Donald Trump has come out and he's saying that, well, you know, kind of softly endorsing the deal, and what he's saying that it's now, instead of Nippon being the owner of U.S. Steel, it will be a partnership and an investment from Nippon. We've still seen nothing in writing, but one of the most interesting things that I have seen from it is there's reporting that Trump wants the U.S. government to have a golden share on the board of directors of this partnership that will have veto power over production to make sure that production does not fall below certain levels. And, you know, so I'm curious about what you make of this as somebody who is, you know, explicitly on the left. And, you know, is it, you know, the union is still remaining very skeptical because nothing is out in writing, right? And I think that's a good thing. That's the right kind of stance to take towards this. But what are you making of this news as it's been unfolding over the last week?
Well, we're going to need to see details because we can't trust anything that Trump says, especially when it comes to his claims that he's doing something to benefit workers. For now, you know, the union is skeptical until it sees more details. And I think the union seems to have come to the conclusion that U.S. Steel is a better negotiating partner than Nippon. I mean, at least they have a labor contract now. And Nippon offered a deal similar to this at the beginning of the year, where they were going to give the U.S. veto power over decisions that were related to quote unquote production capacity. And that was something that the Steelworkers Union thought was some tricky language there, because they interpreted that as Nippon could just mothball factories indefinitely and lay people off, but say, hey, well, we have the capacity at any point to flip it on if we wanted to. So I'm not sure, and that deal was ultimately rejected by Biden. I'm not sure what's changed entirely about this deal, other than Trump calling it that he has golden shares. I know that that's a term that's used in various mergers and acquisitions, but obviously that's something Trump would cling to given his obsession with gold. But it sounds like it could be you're going to have to look at the language here and whether or not it's the same issue that the unions had a problem with back in January. But, you know, with a lot of these things, from this to Trump's tax policy to the tariffs, Trump floated that idea of a sovereign wealth fund and then signed an executive order on that. You know, they're all branded as these economic populist measures, but in their implementation, they're not at all. Tariffs in theory to protect an economy and protect industries and protect workers are good, but what sort of economy are we trying to protect in the U.S.? Is it one that it's still extremely difficult to unionize in? At the end of the day, are tariffs protecting CEOs and executives who can keep prices high and make profits while immiserating further workers who don't get their wages raised to compete with or to be able to purchase goods that are going to go up in price if we're going to bring back a lot of manufacturing over time? I don't think so. When it comes to the sovereign wealth fund, that sounds great. Are we going to fund it through royalties on extractive industries? Are we going to fund it through seizing oil fields and collecting the profits and winding them down and investing that money in climate change fighting initiatives and renewables and modernizing infrastructure? No, we're gonna do it to buy crypto and help Trump's cronies and stuff. So, uh, I've heard what Trump has said about this deal. The unions are skeptical of it for good reason. We're going to have to wait to see what language is specifically in it, because you just can't trust anything the president says at all.
That is, I have been surprised that that so many people are like so going along with it. I mean, and you have Josh Shapiro. I mean, what I've been saying is that, if it is as reported, then it's interesting, and it's probably a good deal. If as reported, it's actually a partnership, not Nippon wholly owning it. But I need to, I'm always talking about, we have to see the details, because so many times, like you said, Trump has said something and then it comes out with the pen on paper and it's just totally either 180 opposite of what he said or not. There was really important missing context. But
from everything I've seen, Nippon has said that they are not interested in a partnership here. That U.S. Steel will become a wholly owned subsidiary of the company.
Yes.
So to me, I don't think the company has changed its position on that. I think that what we're seeing now is Trump wants to announce a deal because he's, president deals, and we're going to get a lot of language to paper over some of the issues that have long existed with this deal.
Yeah. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has been talking about this and been really excited about it. Said, quote, "The deal has gotten better. The prospects for the future of steelmaking have gotten better," he said, emphasizing that he worked closely with Senator Dave McCormick, a Republican from Pennsylvania. He said, "Credit goes to McCormick as one of the many people involved in this," Shapiro said, adding that numerous local Republican and Democratic mayors and community leaders have come out in support of the deal. And it's just like, why are you coming out in support of the deal when you haven't seen it? Here's what the steelworkers have said. David McCall, the international president, said, "We have not participated in the discussions involving U.S. Steel, Nippon Steel, and the Trump administration, nor were we consulted, so we cannot speculate about the meaning of the, quote, planned partnership between U.S. Steel and Nippon, or the, quote, golden share that some politicians have claimed will be issued to the federal government. Whatever the deal structure, our primary concern remains with the impact that the merger of U.S. Steel into a foreign competitor will have on national security, our members, and the communities where we live and work. When the second Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. review was announced, we communicated to the Trump administration our concerns and objections. Nippon has a long history of committing unfair trade practices. Indeed, the International Trade Commission determined that the company violated U.S. trade laws in 13 different trade cases. Just last month, the Department of Commerce imposed duties of more than 200% on Nippon for the illegal dumping of steel. Yet, despite ongoing injury and continuing penalties, Nippon is being rewarded. The USW's only concern has been and continues to be the long-term viability and sustainability of the current U.S. Steel facilities, so as to safeguard the current and future economic employment and retirement security of our members and their communities. There's a vast difference between public relations and putting commitments in writing, just as there is a vast difference between allowing shareholders and executives to cash out and putting workers' interests first. Any final deal that may emerge from discussions between the merger parties and the federal government must be viewed through that lens and not the lens of wishful thinking that has been adopted by far too many politicians and others. Issuing press releases and making political speeches is easy. Binding commitments are hard. The devil is always in the details, and that is especially true with a bad actor like Nippon Steel that has again and again violated our trade laws, devastating steel communities in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. Our members know from decades of negotiating contracts to trust nothing until you see it in writing. And so why are especially the Democrats? I mean, there's like a partisan thing here too that I feel like they're not exhibiting enough partisanship by why are they not at least saying, maybe it sounds good, I need to see the details? Why do you think that folks like Shapiro are going along with this so excitedly?
Well, they're Democrats. They don't know how to be an effective opposition party. There is a lot of nativism, economic nativism tied up into this story. I think probably because the company is called U.S. Steel, when, it's not even the biggest steel company in the U.S. It's not close to the biggest steel company in the U.S. It employs something like 22,000 people, which, that's still a lot of good union jobs. You look at a company like GM that employs like 150,000 people. And there's this fear that, there's this notion of steel as this critical resource that for our national security, we need to ensure we can produce it. And there's the idea that there's a foreign nation out there and maybe there's some sort of Orientalism at play when it's like fear of Japan, people linking it to China or something. But Japan has been a close ally of the U.S. very, very long time. The U.S. has 15 military bases in Japan. But I do think that, aside from that, this story does speak to something that people have a sense of what's happening in the country, which is we are being hollowed out. We are losing our production base. We are going through a downsizing as the world empire, and it's going to be difficult and often humiliating next few decades, probably. And that's not something that either party wants to embrace, that yes, things are going to be declining. So you're going to see Democrats, sort of adopt this idea as well. And, I think a lot of what Trump's economic policies are aware of this fact, aware of US's declining power around the world, as reflected by things like U.S. Steel being sold to a Japanese company, and a Japanese company saying they're going to bring technological innovation to the U.S. And the reaction from Trump to that sort of stuff is to try and flex whatever muscles the U.S. still has through aggressive tariff policy and eventually probably through aggressive military policy. And that's only going to, in my opinion, accelerate the demise of the U.S. And you saw it with the trade war with China. I mean, it was the U.S. that backed down here. It was Trump that backed down here, not China. I mean, China would face enormous difficulty as well in a trade war, but in the long run, they have a economy that is organized in a way that can better assist their workers to weather any of these storms, and they have critical resources locked up in a way where they could really, really harm U.S. military and industrial manufacturing moving forward. And that's probably dawned on a lot of the people in the Trump administration faster now than they had thought initially.
Right. Yeah, it does. I think that makes a lot of sense. But we'll see if the U.S. government ends up taking over U.S. Steel as a part of this deal. Then
I mean, that would be cool, right? I mean, that would be good, I guess. But I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening. But again, let's see what is, and if ultimately, I'm going to. I'm not a steel worker. I don't know sort of the details of the labor conditions right now between the union and U.S. Steel. So I'm going to defer to what they think about this deal when the details of it come out.
Right. Another thing that's been in the news recently is Democrats needing to reach out to men. And, I've always found this sort of thing interesting because obviously, even though actually the median union member is a woman, but people think about unions and they think about men in hard hats, and I mean, there's still obviously a lot of men in hard hats, but in unions, and yesterday, these folks announced, and to be fair to the Democrats, I guess this isn't like something coming from the DNC, but there's a live stream happening, I think, this weekend between Micah Irfin, I think he's a TikTok guy, Olivia Juliana, who was a big sort of abortion rights activist in Texas, and did some good work around that, I think, is my understanding, and Richard Hanania, former white supremacist, about how Democrats can win men back again. So, I mean, that's just like the most recent flashpoint of this whole discussion. But how have you been viewing this as a man yourself? I think how do you I don't know. How are you looking at this conversation about, Democrats talking about investing $20 million in trying to study men? How are you? What are you making of all this?
Yeah, $20 million for something called the Speaking with American Men Project, the SAM project. No relation. But well, again, the first thing to understand is that the Democratic Party is a racket for insiders. Raise money on how bad Republicans are, use that money to pursue awful messaging and lose, and then repeat. And there are people who are making lucrative careers, who have made lucrative careers out of this formula. So I think we are seeing it again. And, the problem isn't language, it's policy. And, based on what I've read about this SAM project, there seems to be an acknowledgement of what the problems are, and that the problems are indeed real, which is progress from when Hillary Clinton was running a campaign about America's already great. Nothing's wrong, everything's great. But once again, the party is unable to offer any effective solutions. Republicans have are also good at talking about problems. I mean, their diagnoses are often wrong, but they run a very grievance-based political campaign, which is pretty potent. So, I would advise Democrats to do the same thing. But when their answers to, why is it that men feel that they can't get a job that's good enough to eventually provide for a family, to get a house, things like that, the solutions coming from Democrats is stuff like home buyer incentive tax credits, workforce training programs, expanded child tax credit. Like, sure, those are good policies. They might help, but the electorate wants people to talk like they're gonna fuck shit up. They want stuff to be torn down. And I think that the electorate has wanted that since Obama, essentially. I mean, I think that his election was due to an electorate that was, pregnant with quote unquote revolution, not revolution as we think of it, but sort of an upheaval of the way things are, recognition that something is really bad and we need things to fix it. Now, he didn't ultimately deliver, which led to the next guy who's promising to fuck shit up, which was Trump. And he actually did. I mean, the pandemic and everything. And then you got, I guess, a vote for Biden to be safer. Okay, let's go to normalcy. But he ended up being awful. And I think any young man who was maybe 18 when Biden was elected, it's pretty easy to see why they don't like Democrats. They're just, nothing was offered to them. And they just come across as losers and weak, whereas Trump and Republicans come across as strong. So until Democrats are willing to be a party that is willing to do a revolution, or fundamentally change how things are, people just aren't excited by them at all. Having said all that, there is something wrong with American men these days, particularly young men. Um, uh, when you see the splits between like Gen Z men and women when it comes to Trump and when it comes to things like their thoughts on immigration, just massive differences, which suggest that there's like this wave of reaction that's focused on dehumanizing people, particularly people of color, particularly women. You see a lot of chauvinism with within the media, that's the right-wing media that a lot of young men are tuning into. And these sort of vectors are stronger when you have times of economic pain and anxiety, which is what the US has been going through for a while now. And so, yeah, you have this wave of reaction sweeping the country that's been induced, promoted, spread by capital because it can distract and divide the working class. And like you have people like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn who are considered, members of the counterculture now. When I was younger, the counterculture was left wing. Now the counterculture is Trumpism, which these guys are kissing the ass of the president and having billionaires on their show all the time. Like, it's pretty dog shit counterculture. So I'm expecting that to flip hopefully sometime soon, and maybe the next generation of kids will realize that that shit's not cool at all, or when these people get older, they'll realize it was all pretty stupid. But I'm not sure what you do about that if you're Democrats. Like, you can't just have a liberal Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan gets tons of money because he is ultimately a stooge of capital. He'll occasionally say things that appear to be populist or working class, but then the next day he'll have, the CEO of Palantir on the show.
Right.
And maybe if Democrats were actually willing to bring in more far left, anti-capitalist, socialist voices in the party, or at least use them as foot soldiers to attack the right and embrace the messaging more, and use their memes that Democrats feel like they need to start focusing on to win men over, they'd have a better chance, because right now the party is just filled with, very boring, weak commentators who don't want to really challenge power and don't have a message that it will inspire people, and think that they can improve their lives, quite like Trump is inspiring people.
Yeah, I really think that's part of it, that the people who kind of fund all of these things on the right, they allow for a certain amount of dissent, really, as long as ultimately you end up supporting Trump, you can really say a lot. You're allowed to kind of step off of the reservation here and there, whereas there's a lot of, from to be able to get like Democratic money, you have there's a lot of conformity that you have to subscribe to, which is why programs like ours aren't funded by folks like that. And so I think that maybe that's part of it, that you can allow Theo Vaughn to say things about Palestine and still ultimately support him, because he was ultimately supportive of Trump. And we'll see if he keeps on with that too much. I think they'll put him out to pasture. But they're allowing it, like, for now. So I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's useful in other ways that they're willing to look past. I mean, ultimately, every day we get fishhook theory confirmed, where center and liberals would much rather align with the right if it means denying the left power. So, they would rather just have Joe Rogan at the end of the day. They would, than have their own version of a Joe Rogan that might actually bring forward a truly, working class critique of the party.
It really is amazing that like it is the same people who are talking about the left needs a Joe Rogan who were saying that Bernie Sanders is racist and sexist because he touted Joe Rogan's endorsement in 2020. And now they're like, oh, we need to go back on Joe Rogan while they were attacking people for doing that back in 2020. It's really, really, really disingenuous. The last thing that I wanted to talk to you about is speaking of men, and we kind of started talking about how like in to a certain extent the Republicans have become like working class coalitionally. The coalition that elected Donald Trump this time was a working class coalition in its majority, and in that the majority of people making under like $50,000 voted for Trump. And yet, they have used that coalition to attack the poorest and the most sort of precarious workers in the U.S. The Medicaid stuff is, part of that. Medicaid and SNAP, the ending of the subsidies for premiums on the Affordable Care Act exchanges. And they're just kind of going for it. And here is how Joni Ernst responded to somebody saying that this is going to kill people. This is how Joni Ernst, a Republican senator from Iowa, responded to somebody saying that, these things are going to kill people.
And yes, and you stated again that as written, and it will change. The bill will be changing. There are going to be some things that we do agree on with the House, though. And you mentioned things like the Medicaid and how some people currently on Medicaid would not be.
I lost your audio there, Jacob. I can't hear you anymore. I can't hear you anymore. Oh, there you go. I got you now. Sorry.
Yeah, the one after that.
Nissan's going to be...
No, the one after that. One where we're all going to die? You don't see the... Yeah, okay. Yeah, play that one.
So, people are not... Well, we all are going to die. So, for heaven's sakes...
Okay, so there we go. I kind of flubbed the opening of that, but yeah, we're all gonna die is how Republicans are responding to concerns about people dying because of the Medicaid stuff, and it really is being responded to in this flippant way. And they're doing this because they're saying, oh, well, it's work requirements. It's not actually cuts. And so if you don't work 80 hours a week, then you don't deserve health care or something. And it's just so crazy because the majority of people who are kicked off are not folks who are not going to qualify. They've showed that in what happened in Arkansas. The majority of folks who were kicked off of Medicaid when Arkansas did their work requirements for Medicaid were not people that didn't qualify. They were people that had paperwork errors. And, I was on conservative radio earlier this week talking about this and explaining how that's just a fact. That's what, the analysis has shown is that it's not that people were not working and were kicked off. It's that people had difficulties with the paperwork. And I also pointed out how just last week we had a congressional hearing about OSHA and heat standards where the Morgan or Littler Mendelsohn attorneys and representatives for construction trade industry groups were complaining about paperwork, right? They were in, billion-dollar industries saying that, oh, this paperwork that is associated with protecting our employees from deadly heat is too onerous. And when they do that, that's like respectable and like, oh, that's business owners. They need flexibility. And yet when workers have difficulty with paperwork, they say, not only do we say well, it's their problem. They're lazy. They deserve it. We say that it's fine if they die because they don't get health care. And there was a Washington Post reporting on this one fellow who was working, and he messed up the paperwork. And so he lost his Medicaid, and he ended up dying because he was not able to get the medicine that he needed. So he lost his job because he had health complications. And, it is just so crazy that people are able to be so flippant about this kind of stuff.
It is. And honestly, it's good that Joni Ernst said that because, we've heard Trump say, oh, we're not touching Medicaid. And Mike Johnson has been saying, oh, we're not cutting Medicaid. We're making the program stronger. Or this is all about getting undocumented immigrants out of the program. Well, there really aren't undocumented immigrants on Medicaid, except when it comes to certain states that offer it for emergency situations when someone's going to die if they don't get a medical procedure, and then they're enrolled in an emergency Medicaid program. So if they're talking about that when it comes to undocumented immigrants, then their policy solution is just let people die, which is what Joni Ernst is speaking to. It kind of reminds me of the former somewhat problematic Democratic Congressman Alan Grayson when he was talking about the Republican healthcare plan is if you get sick, die quick. It's kind of the same mentality that the party still has. But when it comes to work requirements, the plan is to reduce the Medicaid population. It's to disenroll people. They won't say that, but that is the plan. You're ultimately trying to reduce spending on the program so that you can divert it toward tax cuts and mass deportation and a $1 trillion military budget. But you do want to reduce the rolls. And this has been tried. You mentioned Arkansas. This was tried in Georgia in 2023, trying to get people to show that they're working 80 hours or looking for work. And a Georgia think tank analyzed the results. It was a disaster that ended up costing more money than savings because, and I'm just going to read this real quick, potentially eligible Georgians face a steep paperwork burden, as you were saying, Jacob, from completing a lengthy online or paper application to compiling documents to verify qualifying activities and hours. And only about half of individuals who showed initial interest in applying to the program submitted a complete application. And then it goes on to say that spending on upgrades to Georgia's online eligibility and enrollment system represented the largest proportion of total program costs and was almost 5 times higher than spending on healthcare benefits for enrollees. So this program that was ostensibly to save money ended up costing more money because you need to hire more people to go through all this new paperwork that people have to compile. You need to come up with an online system that people can submit this through. You need to come up with auditors to make sure that people are complying with these new means testing or employment verifications. Often that will be work that is contracted out to some private company that will end up doing that and overcharging the government to do it. So you're ending up spending more money, but less on healthcare. And that's what's going to happen nationwide when you start forcing states to implement these programs in exchange to get federal dollars to help Medicaid. So like I said, this is to save money, to go to tax cuts, but it's actually going to end up costing the same amount of money. Money's going to go to contractors to police Medicaid rolls, and healthcare, the actual healthcare that people on Medicaid receive is going to decline by a lot. Really awful stealth way to kick millions of people off their health insurance, which in the United States is, in many cases, a death sentence.
Right. Well, we'll leave it on that hopeful note. Sam Sachs, host of Means Morning News. I really appreciate your time. You can find Means Morning News most days on means.tv. Really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing your episodes next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jacob.
All right. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you want to call in. 844-899-8857. Would love to hear your thoughts on anything that we talked about. I want to talk about, there's a couple other stories that I had on my docket. We had been talking about over the last couple of weeks the Proposition A, I believe it was, in Missouri that gave workers paid sick leave and tied the minimum wage increases to inflation in future years. And this was, a huge, huge deal, giving all Missouri workers paid sick leave. And it was a ballot measure that passed overwhelmingly. 57% of Missourians who voted in favor of this ballot measure. And yet, the Missouri legislature, the Republicans, voted to repeal this ballot measure during the legislative session. The ballot measure passed in November, and the Missouri Republicans voted to repeal it back in April, or early May, I think it was. It is now on the Missouri governor's desk. He does need to sign it for the repeal to go into effect. And he was giving a press conference the other day. Somebody asked him if he planned to sign the repeal, and this is what he had to say.
And another thing I'm interested in is, will you sign the Senate bill that scraps the mandatory sick leave in Proposition A?
Is it the House bill that we just approved this week?
Correct.
Yes. I'll take a look at it, but I'm a big fan of that bill. As I mentioned earlier, it's a huge issue to both small and large business and economic developers. And look, I'm a capitalist in a free market. I do not think that we should allow, in this case, a very liberal group from the East Coast of our country come in and spend millions of dollars to put a question on the ballot that has nothing to do with the input of individually, privately owned businesses, and I'm not a big fan of mandates. I think the markets should set what employees get paid and what the compensation are, and I know businesses are very competitive in doing that, and they're always going to try to take care of their employees the best they can so they don't lose them to the business down the street, and that's something individual business owners should decide, not some piece of legislation that was introduced by somebody not even from the state.
I mean, just such a gross thing to say about the citizens, because it was Missouri citizens who had to sign a petition to get the ballot measure on the ballot. It was Missouri citizens who voted 57% in favor of this ballot measure. And so you're saying that they don't matter. And, we played another clip of a Missouri legislator talking about how this is the problem with direct democracy, is that the people are stupid. That's what these folks think about people like you. That's what they think about the average Missouri worker. They think that instead of the Missouri worker having a say over the conditions under which he or she works, that it is the Missouri boss who should have total and complete say over everything. If it were up to these people, we wouldn't have minimum wage laws, we wouldn't have overtime laws, we wouldn't have child labor laws, we wouldn't have workplace safety laws, any kind of stuff like that. It would all be, they would allow us to be completely at the beck and whim of our employers. Missouri voters do not agree with that. And so we'll see. We'll keep tracking that, but, it's not looking good. I think that he has until sometime in June to sign it if he wants to put it into effect. Hopefully he will not. I know that he's getting a lot of pressure. I know that the Missouri Workers Center is doing a lot of work trying to push back against the repeal of paid sick leave. But yeah, it's just so gross. And I don't know. Palace Real says politicians speak. Indeed. It's, yeah. But this is what they think about folks like us. They don't think that we deserve a say. We got one more segment here, 844-899-TVLR if you want to call in. We might end up wrapping up early, but we got one more segment here. I wanted to talk about Social Security, the SSA commissioner. Social Security the Social Security Administration has been the victim of DOGE. It has lost a lot of people, and we have seen an increase in wait times as a result of that. We've seen an increase in wait times for people who need Social Security, who are trying to retire. The delays increased by as much as 25%, in particular just because of one DOGE policy intended to root out fraud that found no fraud. I mean, you really can't put it more succinctly than that. And so Elizabeth Warren has opened a probe into the staffing shortage and backlog at Social Security. She's saying that, the American people need to know, what's going on? How are these decisions being made? Are the difficulties that this is going to impose on people who receive Social Security, are things like that being considered when these decisions are being made? These are all questions that folks deserve to know the answer to. Elizabeth Warren is trying to, she started a Senate probe to try to get the answers. But I'm not super confident that we will be getting those answers because of who is in charge of the Social Security Administration right now, which includes this guy. This is an audio clip from him addressing for the first time managers at the Social Security Administration, introducing himself and what he did when he was selected to be Commissioner of Social Security, which is, again, Social Security is one of the biggest program that the United States government runs. It's like 30 or 40% of everything that the U.S. government does is Social Security. And this guy is chosen to be commissioner. Here's what he does after he's nominated.
And it's about Social Security. And I'm really not, I swear I'm not looking for a job. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? So I'm Googling Social Security, one of my great skills. I'm one of the great Googlers on the East Coast. But that is the headline for the Post. Great Googler in chief. Chief and Googler, whatever. By the way, I like to have fun at work. We're allowed to laugh. We're allowed to have fun. We're allowed to know each other's families. We're allowed to be normal. How's that? I'm like, what the heck's the commissioner of Social Security? First, nobody said we're calling you if it was about Social Security, so I'm trying to figure it out.
So there you go. Googling Social Security, Googling commissioner, asking what does a commissioner do? I mean, these are the people that are being put in charge of the most important institutions in American life. I mean, just ridiculous. So there you go. There you go. That's the guy that Trump thinks should be in charge of one of the biggest programs in the United States. Somebody who doesn't know what Social Security is, doesn't know what a commissioner does, has no idea what his charge is. But that's the guy that you need to have faith in, according to Donald Trump. We got a caller on the line. Caller from a 315 area code. Caller from a 315 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from.
You're breaking up. I don't know if you're in a bad spot, but I wasn't able to hear that. Let's try again. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Ethan calling from Syracuse, New York.
Ethan from New York. We can hear you now. What's on your mind?
Right. Yeah, I'm a local organizer from CWA Local 1123, and I've been working with the workers at TCG Player, which is a trading card company owned by eBay. And it was recently announced that they were going to be shutting down the warehouse that those workers work at. And, to us, this is clearly a union busting move. The eBay is planning on moving the warehouse down to Louisville, Kentucky, which, as you know, is a right to work state and a low minimum wage. So we're calling for, a boycott, for TCG Player right now as our, as our way to fight back.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I had not heard of that, and just for folks, just so that folks know, what are the kinds of TCG makes trading cards, right? What are some of the big trading cards that TCG Player makes?
Yeah. So we don't make the trading cards, but we have like sort of we do fulfillment for sellers, but the major games that we carry are Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh!
Gotcha. Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! So the union is calling for a boycott of TCG Player to protest this union-busting move. I appreciate you letting us know about that. How quickly? What's the timeline on this? Are they closing it like this month or in the next couple of weeks, or is this something that they're going to be doing over the next year, or what does that look like?
That's a great question. So it was announced last Thursday, and as it stands, the first round of layoffs are gonna happen on June 20th. And then there's going to be another round in July. So they're winding things down really quick after over 600 days in bargaining. They never brought this up at the bargaining table. There was the CEO continually lied about, that there was no intention of layoffs. The floor really came out from under these workers.
Wow. And now that does sound patently illegal. You have to negotiate if your workplace is unionized. If you're going to lay everybody off, you have to negotiate over the terms of the layoffs. The changes in working conditions, obviously being laid off is a change in working conditions, unless I'm somehow misunderstanding the law. Presumably CWA has filed or is filing unfair labor practice charges with the NLRB.
That's right. We filed 3 unfair labor charges so far. Part of one of the charges is about, the fact that they didn't bring it to the bargaining table for decisional bargaining. So, bargaining over whether or not they would actually close the warehouse.
Right.
We also think that, these are illegal terminations, basically. We filed 3 main charges so far.
Gotcha. And so they've already got a place stood up in Louisville that's ready to take these shipments?
That's right. They have an authentication center in Louisville that carries other luxury goods. I don't know if they've handled trading cards before, but they called this, a consolidation of operations. That's eBay's words.
I see. And so how many people work at the location in New York and how many people in Louisville?
Yeah, so we're not actually sure. We don't even know the address of the Louisville Authentication Center. But in Syracuse, 220 jobs, union jobs are going to be lost. And then, we believe there are close to 300 people who work at the facility total who are going to be affected by this.
Wow. Is CWA planning to put up pickets at once you find the address, once you're able to uncover that? Are you going to be putting up pickets at the Louisville plant?
Yeah, we've got big things planned. Don't want to give it away right now, but we've got things in the works.
Okay. Well, if I'm sure that you have other people who could do this, but if I could be of help, let me know. I talk very occasionally, but I do talk to the president of the Labor Council in Louisville. He's also the president of the UAW local there. They represent like 8,000 folks at Ford. And then I think CWA represents a lot of folks. I don't have contacts with the CWA at GE there, but Louisville does have a bunch of union folks out there. So I'm sure there's a bunch of people that would be willing to support if you need pickets out there. So let us know anything that we can do to support. And again, really appreciate you letting us know about this story. Is there anything that our listeners can do other than boycotting Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh for now?
Yeah. So we're specifically asking people, trading card enthusiasts, if you're looking to buy trading cards, do not buy them at TCG Player right now. We've suggested some alternatives like Card Kingdom, which, uses union labor. But right now, if everybody could go to cwa.org/TCG Player, cwa.org/TCG Player, we have a petition going on right now where you can send letters to the CEO of eBay and the CEO of TCG Player to let them know how disgusting you think their union busting is.
Okay, great. And so I just want to, maybe the people listening did not misunderstood, but I misunderstood. We have somebody in the chat saying TCG Player is a marketplace. It needs third-party sellers to use its services as much as buyers using it to buy from their sellers. So, okay. So that means you're not calling for people not to buy Magic the Gathering cards at any, as far as the union's concerned, you can go to your local comic book store and buy a Magic the Gathering card, just not from TCG
Yes,
Player.
absolutely.
Is that right?
That's right. That's right. We love when people support their local game stores.
Okay, great.
So please do that.
Okay, great. Glad to have been able to make that clarification before we let you go. So go to your local comic book store, buy Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon, but do not buy them from TCG Player. Thanks for your call. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, folks. That's going to be it for us this week. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you want to leave us a voicemail. We might respond to it on the next show. Appreciate everybody tuning in. TVLR.fm/contact. If you want to leave us a written note, TVLR.fm/donate. If you would like to make a donation, TVLR.fm/store to buy our merch. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you next week.